Welcome to the Upper Merion Area School District presentation of the new Upper Merion Area High School, and I think we're going to share today an exciting project with a great process and some really exciting presenters. We're going to start with Dr. Tolino, who's the superintendent of schools. You'll hear from Jonathan Bauer, who's the principal of the building that we're putting together. And you'll hear from myself and Dan D'Amico. Dan D'Amico is the project manager for the project and has been with it from the start. I'm an Association for Learning Environments member, have been for a long time, and I'm excited about presenting this to the group. So listen as we take you down the journey of the Upper Merion Area High School project. As we do this, we'll talk today a little bit about the district. You'll hear from Dr. Tolino speaking in depth about that. We'll talk about the master planning process and how we got to what we're doing for the high school. Jonathan Bauer is going to speak to the academic plan, and then you'll see the planning and design process, and ultimately Dan will take you through a virtual version of the project because it's under construction as we speak. So Dr. Tolino, take it away on the district.
Thank you. We're just very fortunate to be involved with the Schrader Group, but also this project. I've been in the district now 6 years, and we just finished 2 other elementary schools, and now, of course, this high school, which is really a long time coming. We have a high school that has been around since the 60s, and it's just time. So we are a district that's located between a number of different highways. There's all kinds of interstates that come through here, 476, 276, 76. I hope I'm not leaving any of them out, but we're kind of in the triangle of all those major roadways. And the King of Prussia area has grown in exponential fashion over the years. So we're only about 17 square miles. We serve King of Prussia, Upper Merion Township, of course Bridgeport, and what's the last one, Jonathan?
West Conshohocken.
West Conshohocken, I'm sorry. So we're a district of around 4,300 students. We have a tremendous amount of industry. That's why I mentioned the highways. We have 422, we have 202, I-76, 276, the Turnpike. So all those highways have, all that infrastructure has brought a great deal of tax base to the community, and it's not necessarily residential tax base, which is really nice for us. We happen to be the lowest residential tax base in Montgomery County for residents, and then of course we have the King of Prussia Mall, which is one of the largest malls in the nation. So we have we also have town centers here. We have the Valley Forge Casino. We have any number of hotels. We have Pfizer, GlaxoSmithKline. So we have all kinds of other groups and corporations in this area that help to fund our schools. So we're very, very fortunate about that. Next slide, Dave. Thank you. As I mentioned before, we're about 17 square miles, 28,000 residents in the community, and we have an amazing educational program. We currently have 7 buildings. We have 5 K through 4 elementary schools. We have a 5 through 8 middle school, and of course a 9 through 12 high school. And we rank very highly across the state in our academic programs. We're very happy about that, but yet we want to keep growing. We're a very diverse school district, which we're also very, very proud of. So our number one goal is to make sure that all of our buildings serve our students. And I think that was the biggest issue with our older high school that we're going to be replacing through this new project, which you're going to see today. Our enrollment is basically what I said before, and we are going to be increasing over the next number of years, and that's one of our biggest concerns. We built 2 elementary schools that I mentioned to you before, and the reason was because we knew that we had bubble groups coming up, but we also know that those kids ultimately are going to wind up at the high school. So we knew that we were going to be in big trouble when it comes time to deal with our high school population. And not only from the size of the building perspective, but more importantly, what Mr. Bauer, the building principal, has really kind of entrenched the staff members into. We do a lot of collaboration. At any given time in our current high school, you can walk through our high school and you can see kids all over the building doing classwork, and we're a one-to-one district, so you see a lot of those things going on in our buildings, especially our high school. And the problem is we don't have the spaces to be able to do it properly. So that was really one of the major reasons why we had to go to another building. Not only do we have to increase the size, but we really wanted to make sure that the spaces more formally fit what we do educationally due to Mr. Bauer's leadership. The other issue is that if Mr. Bauer had come to me, several years ago and said, hey, we need to add an AP class, we need to add a certain class, it would be no problem getting another teacher. The problem would be, where do we put that? We would have to give up a program in order to add a new program, and you don't want to ever be in that situation when you're running a school district. It's like being upside down on a car payment. You just don't want to be there. Next slide, Dave. Thank you. We have about almost 16% of our students have IEPs. We have a gifted enrollment of 156 students, and we're about 40% for low-income students, and our English as a second language is about 225, and that's grown a little bit since we put this slide together. So you can tell that we have a lot of diversity in our school district, a lot of different students in our school district. We're very proud of every one of them, and they all do a great job. So we're addressing this facility need to address all of these issues, not issues, but all of these kind of blessings, if you want to look at it that way, of the different students we have, different types of students we have in our district. We are an operating budget of around $110 million. We pull in real estate tax of about $90 million, and our tax base comes from 42% residential and 58% commercial, and industrial. But as I mentioned to you before, that commercial and industrial is a huge portion here in the King of Prussia area. So we're very happy about that when the economy's good. When the economy's bad, it gets a little more interesting to deal with some of the businesses that want to be reassessed and reevaluated. But we're very fortunate so far. And we do not have an earned income tax. We do not levy an earned income tax to anybody here in the district. Percent of our budget, salaries are around 46%. Personnel benefits around 26%. So when you look at all of that, that's a huge number. It's typical for most budgets. We have about a 10% debt ratio to our budget, 7% operations, special ed and alternative education about 6%, and of course other portions are about 5%. So that makes up 100% of our budget, and we typically don't have budgetary issues here. We've been fortunate in the number of times that we can raise taxes incrementally here in the district. We tend to budget very, very conservatively, but we are very, very fortunate, as I said, because of the tax base that we have here. We, as I mentioned before, I talked before, and this line kind of summarizes it, that we strive to engage students and teachers in the most collaborative process. So the issue really comes down to the old high school, the high school we're going to be replacing, it allows for collaboration, but in spaces that really aren't made to collaborate, i.e. the hallways, i.e. any nook and cranny that the kids and the teachers can find in that building. That's where they tend to collaborate. So what we've done, one of the main goals in this new high school was to create collaboration spaces. And I think what you're going to see later on through this conversation is you're going to see some incredible spaces that have been designed that we look so forward to using. This is going to be an incredible building, but what it's really going to be is going to be an amazing space for kids to learn and for teachers to teach, and that's what's so exciting for someone like me. This next slide gets back to limiting learning. We didn't want to limit learning like we do. I don't want to say we do now, but we do from the perspective of, if Mr. Bauer had come to me with additional programming needs, we would have to eliminate a program to add something else. This facility is going to allow us to continue to create, continue to get larger and larger, and really continue to get better and better at what we do through the spaces that will be added. We also needed a facility where we had our gymnasium, our current gymnasium in the high school might seat 500.
Yeah.
We don't have any place within the district where we can hold large events. Certainly playoff events, those types of events are not going to come here because there's no space for it. We needed to look at that, and the same thing with our performance spaces. We needed to look at the way they were located to the auditorium, and the kind of creativity that we can have for our art spaces just had to change, and that's everything that we built into this new facility as well, which you'll see later on. We also wanted a facility that was environmentally friendly, was certainly economical to run, and we had to fit this facility on a current property with our middle school, which was a challenge. So we had to the gentleman sitting to my right had to get really creative in the way that we fit this facility on a property. The property that we're fitting it on is only about 58 acres, and it already holds a stadium field and a middle school and an existing high school. So what we're doing, as you'll see later, we're building this facility between the old high school and the middle school. So we had to move everything else off our property for a period of time, except for our turf field, our stadium field, where we got a lot of use out of it now. And that's why that was put in place first. About 3 years ago, we put that in, installed that property. We had no choice but to put that field in. Otherwise, we couldn't have done what we're doing right now from a phasing perspective. We also, of course, we keep the community in mind in everything we do. It's important to us to have that support of the community, so this facility will be welcoming and functional to our students and community that it serves. And the community uses our playing fields, our pool, our gymnasiums, and our performance spaces, and of course our ancillary spaces that we want to have through collaboration with the community. One of the things to note is when this will be done, and I know that Dan and Dave will cover this, that all of the fields that will be recreated on this property will all be turf. There will be no grass, and the reason is because we can never get the grass to regenerate. That's how much usage this property gets from the community and of course our own needs. So we felt like, you know what, it just doesn't pay to do that. Let's make sure that we put turf in place and we cover everything with turf so that we don't have to worry about regeneration of grass and keeping people off our fields. We also want to make sure that we brand the facility correctly. We've been working a lot on that through the design of this project. We also had students in about just before COVID, in fact. We had students in, Mr. Bauer and I, and we talked about just this issue, that the students had some great ideas that they've come up with for branding for the new high school. We've really kind of adopted this Viking Nation, where our logo is our mascot are the Vikings. Our logo is the Vikings, and we wanted to make sure that we branded ourselves, and we've kind of taken off with this Viking Nation issue, our deal, and it's really made it quite warm for the kids. The kids like it, the community likes it, so we want to make sure that we brand this thing in such a way that the only colors that we're using on the inside of the building are the colors that we use for the school district. So we've made sure that when you walk into this new high school, you're gonna really feel everything about being branded as an Upper Merion Viking. So we're very excited about that as well.
So you've heard the high-level thought process behind the building, behind the ideas from the community. So we just wanted to take you back a little bit to the master planning that Dr. Tolino talked about. So we'll get into the planning process. We'll reference quickly the elementary schools that Dr. Tolino talked about, and then we'll move towards the high school as a process. So this idea actually germinates way back in 2014, and the timeline that we're sharing with you demonstrates the master planning that went into the district from 2014 to 2015. And initially, the master planning process began with a full facility evaluation of all of the district facilities and a relook at how grade structures might work within the district. Ultimately, the planning was completed in 2015, and the board spent a good 6 months on the planning process and on the approval process on which direction they were going to go with the facility. And initially, at the end of 2015, we were hired again from the master planning process to the design process to begin working on the elementary schools. And the reason I'm going to spend a couple minutes on the elementary schools is because that process is the process that we replicated for the high school as well. And again, the planning timeline that you see demonstrates 2016, 2017, and 2018, and then construction began. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that process. The district has done a great job over time of bringing together all those collective entities that Dr. Tolino talked about in his high-level discussions. So school board administration and building administration were involved in the entire planning process, but also students and public. And so the image that you see is one of the many experiences that we had throughout the district working with them first on the master planning process. So interestingly, as we talked about the square mileage, the very limited square mileage of Upper Marion Area School District as a district, you can start to see that the facilities that they have, again referenced earlier, the number of elementary schools, the middle school, and the high school, all supported that initial need, but at least three of the elementary schools, I should say, had been rebuilt over the recent years, and there were 2 remaining that really needed to be reconsidered in some way, shape, or form. And so the district, prior to the master planning process, was essentially dealing with a catchment area shown on the screen. You can see the Cayley, the Candlebrook, the Bridgeport, and the Roberts Draw areas. And the district ultimately began to look at a modification to the grade structure that they originally had. And I think pertinent to this discussion is going to be, of course, moving from that middle school to high school plan. But the 2 buildings that they considered as part of the initial process were definitely Cayley and Gulf. And the question was whether to renovate or add or to build new at each site. And in the end, it was decided to build new at each site. And what that did was it changed the catchment area of the district to that 5 elementary school model that you see, with Cayley now, Candlebrook, Bridgeport, Roberts, and ultimately Gulf, which had been used as a site for other than district purposes. And so they were able to reuse that site to tear down an old building and to build on that site. Cayley was a little bit different in that the kids were going to school on the site, and we built a building right next to the existing building. So that existing building stayed in place, fully functioning, while we built the new facility, and then the students moved over, and then we did demolition. So that process was in place for the district. They'd done it once before, and moving to the high school, that's the process that they'll be using there as well. Early on, we talked quite a bit about changing learning styles for the elementary schools, talking about those initial concepts that many traditional buildings hold, which is the traditional instruction, the one-on-one, and moving heavily into that research, make, and present concept, as well as all the community necessities that come along with a building. And so again, the district started that process of really evaluating those concepts for the elementary schools, and I think when you see the high school, you'll see that it carried over in an even more phenomenal way to that facility. So we had shared with the district at the elementary level the many concepts that come along with that make, or the research, make, and present concept, and the kinds of spaces that is required in a building across the board. The district has a neighboring district, Phoenixville Area School District, that we had recently built an elementary reflecting all of those needs. And when it came to building the buildings that we did build ultimately for the school district here in Upper Marion, a lot of the ideas behind that were kind of embodied in that initial building as well. So the photos on this changing learning environment screen for the elementary school level reflect a lot of the new concepts that we had started to bring into those facilities. The connected small group and large group spaces, the open resource and media areas, and then of course the multiple size instructional areas. More important though was this presentation area concept, and I think once you see the high school, you'll see how that was really embodied in that idea. At the elementary level, we did a whole series of building tours. We then held a series of visioning and planning workshops, which then moved into the design workshops and ultimately celebration day when the building is open. Same concept and same process is in place for the high school. At that level, when we were working on the elementaries, there are a number of images on the screen at this point. And in that case, you see a number of elementary aged children who were really helping us along with the design process. And I think you see a number of the folks from this presentation team in some of these slides. And some of our favorite times with those kids, of course, were when they came up with their concepts. And you're seeing some of the concepts that the students came up with on the screen, which are really fun to see what a child envisions a building for the future as. So we began to look at the concept as a series of structures, and again, I'm still on the elementary schools, and you'll see how this parlays into the high school shortly. But we started with the concept of academic clustering and how that works in the facility. The carryover here is that the high school is just a larger version of this. And so what's really cool is that the district took a great stance at their elementary level and used that concept and carried it through very heavily to the high school. Clearly, social structures are important at the elementary level. more so at the high school level where students really are on their own sociological structure, and you need to set up a facility that accepts and works with all of those needs of a student of that age. And then of course the learning styles. And so at the elementary level you had everything from the early academic learning through those regular instruction all the way to research and perform. And really the high school is the higher level of that research, make, and perform concept as well, and you'll see that shortly. So the diagram that we ultimately came up with for the two elementary schools was the version that you see in front of us, reflecting the building program at that elementary level. And again, the high school is going to be a larger scale version of this. So the building plans that we came up with for the two sites were sister schools. And all that we did was we mirrored the academic portion that's shown on the right. And the one that you're seeing currently is the Cayley Elementary School. And actually this is the Gulf Elementary School. Right. I see that's how close they are as facilities. So the Cayley Elementary School is the one that we flipped. And it embodies all of those different learning style spaces and had the community type functions as well up front to the building and separate so that you can break out the academic portion of the building at night for when the community is using the balance of the project. So those are all of the elements that you see in this facility and carried themselves out to a beautiful structure. And again, in this case, this is Gulf Elementary School. You can see the STEAM program spaces at the front of the building, and you can also see the community spaces at the front of the building. And just a couple images looking at the kind of architecture that we started to establish in that building. And the slide that you're seeing here represents that learning stair concept that started in Cayley and Gulf, and it wraps right around the Resource Media Center. Again, you'll see the concept carried through heavily into the high school project as well. Very flexible learning spaces, very flexible community spaces. This is the two-sided stage, which can be used from either the dining space or the gymnasium space. And the same kind of open, bright, transparent facilities so that all of those sociological structures are evident and people have a certain amount of continuity and connectiveness to the people that they're with. And just a couple more images of how those facilities turned out. Beautiful buildings that the district is very proud of and that we are very proud of. So, back to the high school. You've gone through the master planning process, and now I think it's important for Jonathan Bauer to talk about their perspective, the high school's perspective, of what drove this facility and what makes a facility of this type.
Thanks, David. What you see there is, 1960 style Upper Marion Area High School, and that's what the building, when it was built, and it's easy to say teaching and learning has changed quite a bit since then, and also changed since the 90s when the building was renovated. So we do the best that we can within the facility that we have, but I think the instructional and the academic plan don't necessarily match what the building was designed to do. This is some examples of that. There's our library information center. That's just the entrance in to show you that it's kind of a closed off space. It's a beautiful space, nice, renovated in the 90s, very large, probably larger than it currently needs to be because libraries have changed a lot. I'm going to talk a little bit about how libraries changed for us. Some of the other spaces, those are the collaboration spaces, sort of just tables and chairs. You can see in the middle there we have a classroom library, and down to the bottom right on the slide. Those are initiatives in our English classrooms where, again, we're decentralizing the library. We're pulling in classroom libraries for kids to have choice and immediacy in terms of their access to literature, but we don't really have classrooms set up and designed specifically for that. And earlier, Dr. Tolino was talking about our athletic facilities. That's an example of the older gymnasium that we have that really doesn't meet to today's instructional health and physical education program nor extracurricular programs. Again, in our classrooms, we're going to talk a little bit about teacher spaces, and if you only have the only place that you give a teacher to live their professional life is in a high school classroom, then that puts a large footprint in your instructional space, and that's something we wanted to change up. There's also, you'll see some on the top right there, that's outside our tech area and our art area. That's where if they do need to go outside to do some projects, That's basically the spaces they have to do them now, not that inviting for them to actually go out and use them, and that's something we wanted to correct in the design of the new building. And then below, again, a look at our athletic facilities and sort of making do with the spaces that we have in spaces that might not have been initially designed for that use. So one of our first priorities was the fact, as mentioned before, we're a one-to-one laptop school. We have been since 2009, first in our county to do that. And as schools have transitioned into those programs, they realize, all schools, that really changes things up quite a bit. So a lot of learning then, happens outside the classroom, because it's not necessarily the teacher as the fountain of all knowledge, but there's an important tool in every kid's hand that helps them collaborate. And as Dr. Tolino mentioned, if you walk in our hallways, particularly prior to the COVID pandemic, you would see collaborative groups sitting on floors, sitting in stairwells, trying to collaborate in areas that necessarily weren't designed for it, but again, making the best of our space. But if that's what our kids are doing, and we have the chance to recreate those spaces, then that's what this project planning has really helped us to do. So the learning stairs, which once you get to some pictures of the facility, you're going to see several of those throughout, and direct access from the classroom for those. Student collaboration spaces where teachers can see, again, a lot of windows, glass, so that teachers could send a kid out into the hallway, and groups, and see what they're doing, and then kids in the hallway see what's happening in the classroom. So sort of that idea of we're a community of learners. I'm learning here, you're learning there, we're all learning in this space together. And then, as mentioned before, so we don't really have quality outside learning spaces, and that's something we wanted to create in the design of the new building. The other thing that I mentioned and hit on is that when you have a one-to-one laptop program, that completely changed our library and our media center. So prior to do research, you had to go to the library, because that's where the technology existed. That's where the computer stations were to do that research. You had to go to a computer lab to access those sorts of things. You put that in every kid's hand, which is very commonplace today, and then you don't need the kids to come to the library. So your library becomes something entirely different. And we've made the best we can, and we've reconfigured our library. We have less stacks and less books in there. You see the books are in our classrooms, not necessarily all in the library. But you don't need that large closed-off space that we currently have. So in the new design, it's an open design for the library where there's access sort of at all times for kids. A greater amount of openness and access to the library space, and maybe not the same square footage dedicated to it. And then also, when we have all these kids collaborating, they're looking for those collaboration spaces, no different than you might see on a college campus, or in a workplace, in today's workplace, where there's a team of people that need to collaborate on a project. They might need a quiet place to do that has the technology and seating and everything to have those important conversations. So we designed a bunch of spaces like that, or planned for a bunch of spaces like that were designed for breakout rooms to have that collaboration happen right as part of our library. We've done a lot with teacher collaboration over time. When you think of 1960s high school or 1990s high school, you might think of teachers isolated in their classrooms, and that's not how education works today. It's not how most workplaces work today. It's a much more collaborative environment where teachers are sharing their curriculum, they're doing common assessments, and we want to give them access to one another as professionals to have regular dialogues about what's happening in their classrooms. So if we take some of that professional footprint out of the classroom and put it into a planning center where teachers can live their professional life there, and it's around their colleagues, then we're going to naturally have some of those conversations that, again, we make that happen now, but it's not, the building design is at least not conducive to the natural flow of those kind of collaborative conversations. So also in the classrooms, if we take that professional life of the teacher and we remove it from the classroom setting, that allows us to change what happens in that square footage of that classroom. In a traditional high school classroom, you might walk in and a teacher's footprint is that desk that they have, and it takes up 20% of the space in the corner of the room. If you don't have to have that desk there, and it can be more flexible, and it can, where the teacher teaches from, the teaching station can move, and where kids' furniture and desks can move seamlessly in that environment, you can make the most of all of that square footage to maximize the instructional area. So that's something else that we were cognizant of as we designed what do these instructional spaces look like. And we mentioned STEAM a little bit earlier. You saw the outdoor spaces that we had for STEAM. Those are important parts of our program, technology and engineering and the arts. If we're going to have well-rounded students, we need to have quality programming in that area. So in our new design, they have direct access to outdoor learning space that's going to be high quality to the indoor learning space that they have. We also developed a makerspace in our building, I would say about 3 years ago. And it's a quality space and it does get some use, but because of its location, it's an add-on after the fact. It's not really conducive to the amount of high quality project-based work that we'd like to see teachers do because it's a little bit isolated and off to the side. So we made sure that that makerspace was more centralized in the new design and right in there with that technology and engineering program, so it's going to get its maximum possible usage. And then again, earlier you saw some pictures of classroom libraries, and that's a literacy initiative that's happening in our English classrooms currently, where we're trying to give voice and choice to kids. We're trying to engage readers, and to do that, the research says you need to give them access to high quality young adult literature right in their classrooms. So we're increasing the number of classroom libraries, and then these classrooms are going to have the casework and the displays to really make that not an add-on to a classroom, but central to what that classroom looks like and how that teacher can use those kind of resources. And then physical education is again one of the areas that we mentioned right off the bat, that athletically our building was not designed to the level that it needed to be today. And that's for our during the day instructional health and physical education program, as well as our extracurricular athletic program. So we make the best of the facilities that we have now, but the new facility is going to be phenomenal for our students and our student athletes. We're going to have a large gymnasium that has 3 different teaching spaces in it, but also when it's not being used for teaching spaces is one very large competition style gym with an indoor track around the 2nd level. Again, lots of uses after school for that, but even in the school day, that's part of the instructional space. We made sure that there was access from the 1st level of gym to the 2nd within the teacher eyesight, so that teachers could use that for a variety of different stations that you might have during a physical education class. And then when it came down to our fitness and our strength and training, we wanted those to be separate areas in the new facility. We didn't want to just be that a hodgepodge altogether, but we know there's quite a bit of difference between what you do for cardio and what you do for strength, and when you might focus on those, and what students or what student athletes might be drawn to those particular areas. So we have high quality separate spaces for that in the new design. And then finally, special education is one of the areas that, as we all know, that those programs have grown in all of our schools, and it takes a lot of square footage because there's a lot of staff that goes along with that. It's not just the teachers, there's aides, there's one-to-one assistants, and there's a lot of things that they need to do in some of those programs where we have life skills and job training that are happening. So again, like I've said multiple times now, we make the best of what we have, but if we can create a facility that's going to have academic classrooms next to functional workspaces, next to life skills apartment spaces, next to our school store, we can put all of that together for a really comprehensive and conducive program for students and the staff that works in there. So those are some of the major academic priorities that we looked at as we went through the process.
So great facilities, and especially great educational facilities, come out of great leadership. And so you heard the very high level thinking from Dr. Tolino, and Mr. Bauer brought you the high school thinking. So the goal is to meld all of that with kind of a vocabulary of spaces. So now we've gone through the background of the school district, we've gone through the master planning process and the elementary projects, and we have this great foundation that Mr. Bauer provided for the high school level buildings. So next was to build that vocabulary, and so the district assembled just a great team of folks from the very beginning that included classroom instructors, included building administration, district administration, included board members. The construction manager was involved at every level so that he knew from the beginning what kinds of spaces we were looking at. And we did a tour. And we'll build that tour here in a second, but you're seeing some of the members of that planning committee here as they toured different facilities. And the tours really, we tried as much as we could to visit state-of-the-art facilities in our region, but we also picked a facility after discussion with colleagues of ours and many of you as members. The facilities that you folks saw that may represent the kind of educational program that Mr. Bauer and Dr. Tolino were looking for the district. So we toured an academy high school in central York, the York area in Pennsylvania. We then went to State College Area High School, and that was a project done by Crabtree, one of our local firms here in the Pennsylvania area, and then up to Stroudsburg Area High School, which Dr. Tolino had worked on previously. But we also went out to Alexandria, Minnesota, and visited the Alexandria Area High School done by Cunningham. And I think you'll see that each of these gave us a basis of vocabulary to work from. So Dan, you want to start with the Alexandria?
Sure. So as you can see from this slide, Alexandria is located more in a rural site compared to Upper Merion. But as we get to the interior, you'll see what really excited us as we packed our bags and headed out west in the cold climate of Minnesota. First and foremost, when you walk into the building, you come into the main collaboration commons. It was buzzing with energy all day, and that really struck us to see how this building was organized around this central space. And it was really exciting to see how something that's typically utilized maybe 3 times a day as a cafeteria could then be utilized throughout the entire day. There was always students, teachers in that space at different times of the day, collaborating, conversing. So that was something that really stood out to us. And from this larger space, you can see how the organization of spaces around collaboration was throughout the entire building. So this would be one of the classroom wings. And again, the classrooms are organized around the open collaboration space, the collaboration stairs. And to really engage that space, they utilized glass partitions you can see on the left-hand side to allow for that transparency and visual connection to extend the classroom outside into the corridor and start activating these spaces. Off the main commons, there was a food court type of serving area. And then next, this was Central York. I think, Dave, you can speak better to this.
So Central York is actually a building that we built a number of years ago, and the building is built around an academy structure, and each of the major wings houses a house of program. And it began to give us some ideas for how a facility could be organized in terms of the academic structure. But more of the building has a very high-level performing arts complex and some tremendous athletic facilities that sort of were items that we wanted to mirror in this facility. So the first thing that you're seeing is the very large, almost college-level gymnasium with the running track at the top level. The concept was really adapted to the new Upper Merion Area High School project, so you'll see a lot of similarity to that. We built a very impressive natatorium at that facility that is also very much replicated in the new facility that we're building here. And those were some of the major elements that we took away from that facility. So again, the Alexandria project really represented a lot of the social structures that we thought were important. The Central York High School really represented some of those community type functions that were really important to us. And the image that you're seeing in front of you now is the State College Area High School by Crabtree. And this facility in the image was not complete. And when we visited it, it was still under construction, but the primary areas of it had been almost completed, so it gave us a good sense of what the building looked like. And I'm sure the folks from Crabtree would like us to have photography from the fully occupied and fully furnished facility, but I think the images that we took were enough at that time to give a really great sense of what that space was. And some of the things that you see here include those large research areas, but even more importantly, you see the branding. And the branding is important to the facility that we've brought forth as well. Each of the small learning community areas had very social structures attached to them as well, and that's what you're seeing in the image in front of you. And really, they're homes for students to just do what they need to do. They're not assigned educational spaces. They're the pull-out spaces that a student can use when they're going to do their research or going to do their team projects. Another thing that was kind of interesting to us that carried through to one of the design elements was a really nicely put together outdoor amphitheater, and you'll see kind of a replication of that as well.
Last but not least was Stroudsburg High School that Dave mentioned Dr. Tolino worked on previously. A couple points of interest in this school that we really focused on were the athletic facilities. Here you see the auxiliary gym that's utilized with mats. One thing you'll see in the new design is we converted the existing middle school pool into a multi-purpose room and took some of the components from this space into the new facility. The fitness, I believe Dr. Tolino, a lot of use from the community, or at least a school member used this space. So we took some parts from there. And last, the theater. There was a lot of discussion about being as flexible as possible. And you'll see in the new design there's a few things that we did to allow the new theater to be flexible and used in different ways.
So I guess now you've got a basis of educational goals that we established as part of the project. You see some of the vocabulary that was built around that. This slide is very similar to the elementary level slide in that it represents the secondary school learning types versus space types and how those adapt. And some of those images that we continue to kind of propagate through the process include these common STEAM research centers, learning and presentation stairs, the team rooms, and the project areas. So all of these concepts are reused and rethought in the facility that we're looking at. So the next step is taking all of that and applying it to the site. And what you have here is the site of the high school and middle school for Upper Merion. And you can see that there's an area here, not a large area because Dr. Tolino talked about how tight the site was, but an area of green that we were really able to focus on because the existing high school has to stay operational for Mr. Bauer and his entire population while we're building the new facility. Now the community has some neat things kind of integrated into it. You can see at the lower portion, you see one of the district's existing elementary schools, which also currently offers some of the parking for the high school. You see in the upper left-hand corner in red, that's actually one of the community ball fields. And then there are a couple other areas outlined in red that weave all the way over through a pathway complex to an actual community center, and you can see the pool kind of right in the center of that. And furthest over to the right was the original Cayley Elementary School building, which after this imagery was replaced with the new facility. So there are all these great community elements that are available to work between as we talk about the project. The challenge, of course, is figuring out how to get all of those playing fields on the site. Dr. Tolino alluded to the amount of site that we decided to use as artificial turf in order to allow those to be usable year-round. So we began this process of master planning with a whole series of options. And you'll see a variety as we go through here, but option one was to demolish quite a bit of the high school, maintain a few pieces of the facility that worked well, and to build in the areas that the current building were not occupying. So in other words, you build in some areas that the building doesn't occupy, and then you start to demolish those portions as Mr. Bauer moves all of his students over into the new facilities. So option one was a reuse of the gym. The second option was also a reuse of the gym, but also looking at a classroom wing that interestingly was already an exception to the zoning requirements. And we decided we could probably leave that where it was since it was already grandfathered by that. And then to also reuse the performing arts area. And uniquely, in thinking about the amount of green space that we did and did not have, the idea here was to potentially put a parking deck with a playing field on top of it. A pretty foreign concept in a suburban school district building, but one that we had to entertain because of the tight site. Option 3 is kind of a melding of those two options, option 1 and option 2. Again, maintaining the gym, looking at the idea of a parking deck with a playing field on top of it. And then we began to investigate the new building location. So option 4 shows a new high school directly adjacent to where the outline of the existing building, and new parking down where the existing baseball field and other fields are. Option 5 is just another location for that new high school. And there's an element here that we'll show in one of the site diagrams shortly. There's a light line that runs from the bottom of the drawing to the top of the drawing, right through the tennis courts in this item, and that is an underground stream. And you can kind of see the outlets and the inlet, bottom and top, of the existing stream and the water course that it took originally. And during the time frame of one of the construction projects on this site, it was made an underground stream to try to allow conveyance across the site while allowing the balance of the site to be used for playing fields. So that played a role in the design of the ultimate building. And then we tried to figure out how this building might actually hop across that line. And so option 6 shows new construction potentially built over that conveyance of the stream. And that starts to raise some real challenges from an approval standpoint. So ultimately, there was a big discussion about education and how education might move from the middle school to the high school levels as time goes on. And really, is it absolutely important that we have middle school grade structures and high school grade structures, or will there come a day when a middle school student instead gets to pick high school type programs that they can take? And therefore, isn't it important that they have the ability to be able to move back and forth between the two buildings? So option 7 began to investigate this idea of connecting the two academic structures through a central athletic structure. And to the left of the middle school word on this diagram are all of the middle school gyms, pool, and athletic facilities. And this concept started to show the areas on the right of the yellow highlighted area of the high school as also athletic areas, so that the two buildings shared a centralized athletic structure that allowed for a very large community use or a very large connection of athletic programs between the high school and middle school. And that was the beginning of the process here. So the balance of these diagrams really start to define how we saw this building stacking itself in a very similar format to how we started to structure those elementary schools in the master planning process way back when. So in this concept, you begin to see the Crossfield Road, which is the main access point for the high school, and actually for the middle school drive-through for parents, begins to become the access point for our commons area, very similar to what Dan was talking about for that central commons area in the Alexandria project, with all of the academic structures to the left, and then performing arts and athletics to the right. And then once you took the existing high school down, which is where you see the playing fields in the lower left-hand corner, those eventually get converted all to the playing fields, and that whole strip on the left-hand side of the property becomes athletic fields for the entire complex. And so these are just diagrams as that concept began to meld into a reality. And we're turning you 90 degrees here in these images, and I think the balance of the images actually are at this angle, and so we wanted to get you reoriented with Crossfield Road on the right and the high school at the left, all connected to the middle school at the top of the diagram. So you can just see how these begin to stack themselves with all those programs. And it began to articulate some pretty high-level passageways, north, south, and east and west in the building to allow all this connection to occur. So that was the beginning of the project, and ultimately we have a term on here, realizing a dream, and I think we all think that what's going up on the site right now is truly a dream and can't wait for it to be done, but process is what process is. And so that germination of not just a middle school and high school, but really a secondary campus came to light, and one that was very highly master planned as well. The image that you see here is a great compilation of what this facility will ultimately be. You see all of these community connection points throughout King of Prussia, which is just fantastic. Everything from the Upper Merion Township Library and Township Building and the Upper Merion Township Park, which, by the way, is where the small pond that begins the stream that runs across our site is actually located. All the way across Candlebrook Elementary to what is now what will become the new Upper Merion Area High School, connected to the middle school with the community center and Cayley Elementary School, all located in close proximity. So the site here shows the parent drop-off area, which is actually a shared drop-off area between the middle school and high school. And that loop is meant to extend throughout the whole site to allow for us to get as much of the parent drop-off traffic as we can onto the site rather than bleeding out into the community roadway network. And then right in front of the building is the bus drop-off and, of course, the visitor parking areas so that they have a secure entry point. So from the top, when students are dropped off, they have access directly from the middle school and high school circulation route down into the building through the athletic complex into the commons. And the bus drop-off drops all of the students off into the commons so that that becomes the collector point. Further, there is a bridge that connects the common type spaces for the facility to the 3-story academic facility on the bottom of the drawing. And in between those two is a really fantastic courtyard that we exposed the stream that was covered at the bottom side of the site here, and Dan will have a great video that demonstrates how that works. And so the first floor demonstrates all of those common spaces on the right-hand side and all of the academic spaces on the left. There's a core of science and technology programs right across the bridge portion of this building that connect back to all of the learning resource concept areas. And those become kind of the learning hub of the building with all the traditional learning spaces around those, plus these learning stairs that you'll see shortly. So Dan's going to take you through the building.
Thanks, Dave. So first we're going to start with an overall fly around of the exterior. You can see as it starts to rotate the middle school, the existing middle school is now on the right. The new high school facility attaches through the athletic complex, and as we come down around to the front of the building, you can see centralized now is the new gym. We come down to the front of the building, and through this large expanse of glass is that main commons, and that's the organizing space for the whole building. We come across the front of the admin. You see the connecting bridge, what we call, that takes you from the learning resource to the academic wing. As you come around this side, we highlight the learning collaboration spaces, and you'll see one on the back side by picture framing the large expansive glass. Down this side, you see a lot of academic spaces, and as we come around the back, you'll see again another collaboration space, the learning stairs, highlighted and picture framed by that with those large expanses of glass. Along the back here, we have that open stream and courtyard, and we'll have another video showing that. Along the back here is the performing arts. We'll come around down into the natatorium and back connecting to the existing middle school. This video here kind of highlights that open stream concept, and it brings you up to a courtyard that is accessed directly from the art wings. And you saw earlier, and Jonathan spoke of it, there wasn't much outdoor space for the tech eds and the art programs to have a nice outdoor space. So there's an amphitheater, there's a courtyard that can be used for outside education and outside display of artwork. Next, we'll start to hop into the building through the main vestibule. So as you come in, if you went straight through the vestibule, it takes you into the commons. But most days you come through a secure vestibule that has direct access to the admin area. You come into this space, check in, and one of the things that was very important is having a lot of glass and visual connection to these spaces. So everything is connected off of this main hub of the commons. Next, getting into the commons themselves, Again, we see this space being activated throughout the day, not just for dining. It connects the academic wing to the left, now looking at the gym and performing arts side, and with the visual connection with this large expanse of glass to really bring the inside or the outside in. And up to the second floor, we have the library commons overlooking that space, really putting literacy on display when you walk into the building. The commons has a raised platform area you can see here to kind of differentiate different dining spaces and activities. Along with transparency into all spaces, we have the Career Center right off of the main commons, again front and center. And like many of the spaces in the building, we have guidance offices that are organized around a collaboration space. So with the visual connection of the glass and transparency, counselors can come out, collaborate with students, and it's a nice, vibrant space. The theater here utilizes an orchestra pit and has a pit filler to allow for different types of performances. It's more of an intimate space that houses 650 students or occupants 450 on the first floor. The balcony in the back there utilizes telescoping platform seating for 200 students that can either be pulled out as you see here or pushed back and provide flexible space that folding partitions can use to close off that space. One of the topics that we needed to focus on was creating a space where the entire student body could fit into one space. So here in this large gymnasium, we can fit the entire student body on the first and second floor with retractable bleachers. There's a running area along the top perimeter of the gym. And off to the side, off to the left, Jonathan mentioned earlier, there's a direct connection from the gym floor up to the running track to make that space as flexible as possible. We also developed a state-of-the-art natatorium. You can see there's a diving well to the left. It's an 8-lane pool with north windows. As we spin around here, you can see a viewing mezzanine up to the top. And again, this is connected directly across the gym. This portion of the building is in close proximity to the middle school, so we have that direct connection and shared athletic spaces. Back in the commons, we can fly into the library commons, and unlike the existing space that's closed off, this is open. This space right here really houses the stacks, but it's a large, expansive space. The stacks are mobile, so the space can be flexible and used in different ways. And what we did is we pulled some of the program out of the actual library space to open it up. And you can see as we move down the hall, around the corner, the open collaboration space, again, organizes different breakout and small group rooms that typically were housed in the library, and expanded it and created this library commons for students to use throughout the day, different touchdown spaces. And one of the things that we discussed earlier is learning happens everywhere. So we really tried to activate corridors and not just make them hallways, but places where students can touch down and have learning all day and collaborate. And one of those areas is a good example of that is this connecting bridge between the main core spaces and the academic wing that houses the lockers. So as you cross this, what we call the bridge, there's actual touchdown spaces that students can congregate around, even if it's for a chance encounter, and collaborate. So education happens everywhere. The main part that really emphasizes this collaboration are the learning stairs. And these are found down the center of the academic wings, one on each side, and the classrooms are flanking it. You can see the glass in the classrooms that really provide that visual connection that allows the classroom to extend into the corridor. Around the learning stairs at the different floor levels, there's countertops for touchdown spaces. There's open collaboration areas with soft seating, educational classroom seating for different types of activities that students can perform throughout that space. And here's another view. You're just seeing that open connection from first floor to third floor. With this large expansive stairs, you can have large presentations, you can have small groups. There's a projection screen and projector in this area that teachers can come out and have large presentations for a large group of students. Here we'll take you into a typical classroom, and as Jonathan mentioned earlier, the teacher home base was pulled out into an instructional planning center, which gave more room back to the classroom for education. We try to minimize the amount of casework as much as possible and still met the school district's needs, but just tried to give most of the floor plan back to educational purposes. Again, you can see the glass on the wall to the corridor to provide that visual connection. Another organizing factor was making sure that we put tech ed and the arts on display instead of off in some back corner of the building. So the tech ed manufacturer steam rooms were right in the center of the academic wing, and you can see here with large glass overhead doors that can open up to some more collaboration space. It has that connection to the inside and also to the outside, providing a plaza for students to bring projects out, to work on them, to display and collaborate on, and have a nice exterior space for that work. As we come around to more of like a work area, STEM room, you get a better shot of the visual connection between the rooms, into classrooms, and then out into the corridor, where we have some more seating and a large collaboration space at the top of the steps there. You can put projects on display or still work on projects between the different disciplines in the school. We also incorporated the family consumer science rooms into the academic wing. Here you see the child development lab that has an educational classroom side with a direct connection, open air connection to the daycare side. And the school has a pre-K program that will have students interact with young children and get first hands-on experience learning how to educate those younger children. There's also a fashion lab as part of the family consumer science that we provided right in this space adjacent to the tech ed and the family consumer science kitchens that have 4 pods of kitchen spaces along with the teacher space. There's 2 rooms like this in the building. And again, trying to locate those so students throughout the day can walk by, look in, and see these different activities happening instead of being in a different space in the school altogether. So with the arts, like the tech ed, we try to provide a direct connection to the exterior. The 3 art classrooms overlook the exterior courtyard and have direct connections, so projects can be brought out to be either worked on or displayed as an outdoor gallery adjacent to the exterior amphitheater overlooking the space, and really allows for a flexible work to take place in the 3 art rooms. As we come back around, there's a 3D art program that utilizes a few kilns with pottery wheels, along with digital labs and 2D art labs. Again, we try to bring that visual connection through the classroom into the collaboration spaces that could be set up as a gallery space. So there's tack boards and then the furniture that we'll select with the school district will help them organize a gallery space with track lighting and different things like that. We try to maximize the collaboration space. So here you're seeing outside of the science classrooms, a science collaboration space that, again, the labs and the educational space extends out of the classroom into the corridor, activates that space, and is right adjacent to the main learning centers.
So it's a little over a year ago that the district held their groundbreaking. It was the beginning of COVID, and you can see that in the imagery here. And they've come quite a long way in a very short amount of time. The great thing about this process, and the last image that we have for the day here, is the building as it stood this morning. You can see the glue laminated lumber for the common space. You can see the 3-story academic wing on the left-hand side, and you can see the beginnings of the theater construction on the very right, with all of the athletic spaces coming towards us eventually. The process is something that I think the community is taking great pride in. The students are witnessing the construction of this building every day. The administration is doing the same, and they all know that eventually they will be moving from that original and old building to this new one, and I think they'll celebrate the day that that happens. So I think probably Dr. Tolino and then Mr. Bauer have some closing comments on the process.
Yeah, we're thrilled with the process. We're thrilled with where we are right now. We're very, very excited for the community, for our teachers, and more importantly, our students for years to come. You know, I've been a superintendent for 20 years, and I've done a lot of projects, and there's nothing more fulfilling for me than creating these environments, being part of creating these environments for kids and for teachers to collaborate in. This is just going to be a very, very special project, and we can't wait for some of you folks to come out and visit it.
And I do not have that experience. This is my first time going through a building project like this, and it's absolutely exciting to be able to serve your community. We're all stewards of the community. So these buildings will be here long after a lot of us work here for Upper Merion Area School District. I look forward to working in that building for a long time. But it's just like the building currently built in 1960 has served this community for a long time to come. I've enjoyed getting a chance to look at what does the future hold for Upper Merion and trying to build a building that really fits today's and tomorrow's needs. It's been a great experience.